Shabbat Shalom. About a month ago, I had a special birthday, and since Larry outed me, I'll remind everybody what the number is. Last month, I turned 40. I know. That makes me younger than most of the men in this room, but somehow older than all the women. Say that's a special thing about membership at Shaarey Zedek. The women never get over that age. So last month, I turned 40, and I'll be honest with you, it was kind of a tough birthday. It's, for me, a tough age to hit for whatever reason. That number means something. And really in the last month, dentist appointments, various doctor, even looking at magazine articles, TV, the internet, 5 words keep coming up with regard to men in their 40s. Those 5 words are, you know, at your age. There are 5 words that I have a feeling I'm going to keep hearing over and over again for the rest of my life. And somehow, you know, at your age is typically followed with a list of things that I now need to do. You know, before you're 40, you know theoretically you need to eat well. Maybe you need to work out. You need to take care of yourself. And you don't think a whole lot about it. But once you get to a certain age in life, and for some people it's 40, and others it's 50, and some it's probably still coming, you start to say, you know, it's not just enough to know that I need to eat well in a very general way. You start to cut things out of your diet. You start to be a little more careful. Maybe you count calories. Maybe you count sugar. Maybe you count fat. Maybe you skip that 4th meal and just do 3 a day. You start to really pay attention to the details of what you're putting into your mouth. Something happens at that age that you start paying a little more attention. And you know, you don't just go work out, or you don't just go play ball. You get to a certain age, the details matter. You have to stretch first. Learn that one the hard way. You have to stretch first. You have to stretch afterward. You have to do the arms. You have to do the legs. You have to do cardio. You have to do weights. And depending on who you follow, you have to do more of one than the other. And every single detail counts. I'll tell you, Rebecca, who's become so passionate about working out, actually became a certified physical trainer. Every detail counts, let me tell you. So it's with our food. It's with working out. It's with every aspect of our being that you hit a certain age and you start to pay a little more attention to the details. You start noticing the little things and realizing that each of those little things matter. I came across a quotation this week from somebody who said, if I would have known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. And it's true. We start to worry about and think about these details and ask, how can I not only live a long life, which we know is partly genetics and much in God's hands, but we also ask the question, how can I make the quality of my life better? How can I make sure that I can do the things that I want to do at each age? We come now this week to our Torah portion, Parashat Mishpatim. There are more mitzvot, there are more commandments listed in this Torah portion than any other Torah portion in the entire Torah. Now, just last week, we read the 10 Commandments. And there's an interesting midrash that says on each of those 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments, so every time I say the 2 tablets, I think of that scene with Mel Brooks from History of the World, right? God gave unto thee 10 commandments for all to enjoy. Torah doesn't exactly say that. Right? So God gave us these 2 tablets containing the 10 commandments. 5 commandments that regulate how we deal with God, our relationship with God, the vertical commandments. And a tablet containing 5 mitzvot, 5 commandments about the horizontal commandments, how we engage each other in an interpersonal way, how we treat the other. 5 commandments on each of the 2 tablets. And the Midrash comes to teach that the tablets were covered with the exact same amount of writing. They looked identical from afar. They were covered in exactly the same way. But it's interesting, because if they're covered in exactly the same way, the 5 mitzvot, that one tablet that talks about how we deal with God and our relationship to God, contains 146 words. 146 words. You can count them if you don't believe me. That other tablet, again, looks exactly the same. 46 words. Compare those two. How can they look exactly the same? Other than the words on the tablet containing the laws with how we deal with each other were written in a much bigger font. How else would they look the same? Other than the words, don't murder, don't steal, don't be jealous of other people, was written this big, when how we deal with God had to be written this big in order to cover the same amount of material on the tablets. Now, there are some who come to teach that that must mean that the ethical commandments are more important than the ritual commandments, because after all, they were written much bigger. Perhaps God says it's more important how we treat each other. Or as our Torah portion this week reminds us, perhaps it's more important how we treat the stranger, the other, than it is even how we relate to God. After all, maybe that's why there are fewer words containing the same amount of space as the other tablet that talks about how we deal in our relationship with God. But that was last week, because then we come to this week's Torah portion. And this week's Torah portion, Parashat Mishpatim, begins in a very interesting way. It says, Ve'ela Mishpatim, Asher Tasim Lifnehem. These are the rules that you shall set before him. But there is a Vav in the beginning. And the great medieval Rabbi Rashi comes to teach that the Vav, that one letter that begins our Torah portion this week, is a conjunctive word. It unites this week's Torah portion with last week's. God didn't just give the 10 Commandments on Sinai. God gave the entire Torah. And more specifically, the 54 mitzvot in this week's Torah portion, most of which have to do with how we treat each other, were also given on Sinai. So don't just count the words on this tablet or that tablet. Know that there's an incredible amount of material, an incredible amount of detail that God expects of us in the vertical relationship, and an incredible amount of detail in how God expects us to deal with each other, especially to treat those who are in need. In fact, the very first section of mitzvot in this week's Torah portion has to do with how the Israelites were to treat their slaves. That's a weird thing, because no Israelite was to have a slave for at least 40 years after the giving of the Torah. So why begin in that way? The rabbis come to teach it's because God wants us to remember how that feels like to be the other, to be the stranger, to be the oppressed, to be the persecuted. And when we remember what it feels like to be persecuted and oppressed, to be the stranger and the other, then we're going to treat those with whom we come into contact in a different way. Because after all, how we treat each other matters. And more to the point, the details, the most minutest of interactions with each other matters. Every please and thank you, every yes sir or no sir, or yes mom and yes dad, those matter. Just like every detail of the vertical relationship matters. Do you light Shabbos candles? Do you keep kosher? Well, in the house, but not out of the house. Do you observe the holidays? Do you celebrate Shabbat? Do you live life with meaning and with purpose? At some point, you realize that how long you live is in God's hands, but the quality of our life is in our hands. The same is true with our spiritual lives. The quality of your life is in your hands. The details matter. So I'm going to ask everyone, please take out your chumash. Please take out your red Eitz Chaim located in front of you. This is a book of commandments. It's a book of laws. It's a book of stories of our people. It's a book with a whole lot of details. Open it up anywhere and put your finger down on a verse and take a look at it. Why did you get that verse? Why did God choose for you right now in this very moment to get that word or that verse, that commandment or that story? Why? And how are you going to take the details of that mitzvah or that story to make your life more meaningful, more purposeful? Why did God choose that one for you? You know, in life you reach a certain age and you realize the details matter. The food we put into our bodies, how we work out. But you also come to realize that your spiritual life matters too. And whether you're 40 or you're 50, or perhaps older than that for some of the men in this room, or whether you're still 20 or you're still 30 for the women in this room, when we add in these details to increase our spiritual lives, it's not just length of years we gain, it's quality of life as well. This Shabbat of Parashat Mishpatim, may we remember the details matter in how we take care of our bodies and how we take care of our relationship with God and how we care for the other as well. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may we be reminded and strengthened of these facts this week. And let us say together, Amen.